The Galactic Summit was never about peace. It was a theater, posturing and flexing wrapped in diplomatic jargon. Every 100 years, empires, coalitions, and syndicates sent their most polished representatives to play games of status and superiority. Among them, none flaunted their arrogance quite like the Xerians. The Xerians, with their flawless orange skin and liquid metal eyes, believed themselves the apex of civilization. Advanced, artistic, beautiful, they barely hid their contempt for the other species, particularly the chaotic, war-born humans. And for centuries, the Xerians had kept a long-standing tradition that blended mockery with ceremony. The joke bride, Iti, was never serious. A Xerian woman, selected as an ambassador of union, would be sent to some primitive or laughable alien race for a symbolic marriage. She'd return within days, unimpressed, untouched, and thoroughly entertained by the crude antics of the unfortunate groom. The council would share drinks, and the story would be archived for humor. This cycle, the unlucky bride, was Kalira. A third-tier noblewoman with a sharp tongue and zero patience for bureaucratic nonsense, Kalira had once insulted a High Minister's poetry recital. She suspected her selection was revenge. She said nothing during the briefing, just raised an eyebrow as the target species was announced. Human, the diplomat said with a grin. Captain Jackson Reeve, Earth Alliance, Outpost Vesta. Kalira stared. You're sending me to the edge of space to marry an ape with a gun. Officially, it's a cultural alliance initiative. Unofficially? The diplomat shrugged. It'll be a great story when you get back. She boarded the cruiser without ceremony, not even saying goodbye. Earth was uglier than she imagined. Dusty, harsh, full of square gray buildings and unnecessary noise. Her ship touched down outside a dull military structure surrounded by dry fields and blue skies. 2 moons hung low. She adjusted her travel cloak and stepped out to meet her fate. Captain Jackson Reeve, meanwhile, had been fixing a hydraulic seal when the alarm buzzed. He wiped sweat off his brow and checked the pad. Incoming Xerian diplomatic vessel. He frowned. I didn't order takeout. When Kalira strode into the outpost, he stood still. She was tall, glowing faintly, with white hair that caught every bit of sunlight like woven frost. She looked like a goddess who hated everything. He cleared his throat. Can I help you? I am Kalira of Zera Prime, she said flatly. I am your bride. Let's get this over with. Jackson blinked. Once, twice. Bride? Like wife bride? It's ceremonial. Don't flatter yourself. We'll go through the motions, I'll report back, and you'll return to fixing broken pipes. Well, he said, setting down the wrench. Welcome to Outpost Vesta. Try not to trip on anything. It's all primitive. Their first week was hostile. She called the water purification system prehistoric. He called her translator snobbish in 12 languages. She criticized the food. He ordered extra rations of beans just to annoy her. At night, Kalira stared out the window, wondering how a civilization so backward could have survived space. Jackson just kept working, occasionally glancing over his shoulder. The turning point came during a thunderstorm. Not the Earth kind. This was a plasma blizzard from a nearby nebula's radiation trail. Power failed. Heat vanished. They were trapped in the dark. Jackson found her huddled near the core chamber, arms wrapped around herself. Despite her bluster, Xerians weren't designed for cold. Without a word, he wrapped her in his jacket and pulled her close. She resisted. I don't need human comfort. Not comfort, he said. Survival. They spent that night sharing. Body heat in silence. She felt the steady rhythm of his heart, the rise and fall of his chest. No words, just warmth. The next morning, the power returned, but something had shifted. Kalira began asking questions instead of issuing critiques. He showed her how he maintained the security grid, and she rewired a backup drone to monitor the perimeter. They argued less, laughed more. Once, she nearly smiled when his coffee machine exploded. He began looking forward to her sarcastic comments. She found herself watching the way he moved, how he handled problems, how he listened. No arrogance, just effort. They weren't a joke, not anymore. One night, under the moons, she asked him why he stayed in a place so lonely. He shrugged. Out. Here it's quiet. I can think, be useful. Back home I was just one more cog. You're not just a cog, she said softly. And then he kissed her. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet brush of lips, unexpected and slow. She didn't pull away. The following days were better. She started calling it home. He stopped setting up the guest quarters for new arrivals. No one else was coming. The drone, reprogrammed by Kalira, sang Zyrian lullabies at night, and Jackson led it. Then the readout appeared. She ran a diagnostic after fainting briefly in the lab. It had to be stress, or low protein. Instead, the screen showed a joint. DNA strand, Zyrian and human, stable, perfectly integrated. She stared, eyes wide, breath shallow. Jackson entered minutes later carrying a thermal pack of food. He saw the screen. Saw her expression. You're pregnant? Kalira nodded slowly. I didn't think that was even possible. Neither did I. They sat together in silence for a long time. Then she laughed. One of those disbelieving, breathless laughs that cracked something inside her. I was sent here as a joke, she whispered. To mock your species. He touched her hand gently. Guess the joke's on them. She didn't cry. Zyrians weren't raised for sentiment, but her fingers curled around his. The next day, she sent a secure transmission back to Zira Prime. It contained no words, just a single image. Her, wearing a patched Earth Alliance uniform, leaning casually against Jackson, who was grinning like an idiot. Her body glowed faintly under the sunlight, the unmistakable sign of early Zyrian gestation. On Zira Prime, the Council of Superiority fell into stunned silence when the image appeared on the display dome. She's pregnant, one of them whispered. Another coughed. With a human. There was no laughter. Orders were issued within minutes. A diplomatic vessel was launched at maximum velocity toward Earth. Kalira was to return immediately. Not as a joke bride now, but as a high-priority genetic asset. Back on Vesta, Kalira received the summons. Zyrian Command demands your return, the message said. Immediate extraction authorized. Comply at once. Jackson read the message. Over her shoulder. They're not taking you, he said quietly. You stay. We raised this child together. They had their joke. Now we make our life. But Kalira shook her head. I have to go, she said. Not for them. For us. They need to see what they've done, what we've made. He took a breath. And what if they don't let you come back? Her fingers traced his jaw, soft and slow. Then I'll make them regret it. When she stepped onto the Zyrian vessel, her hand lingered in his until the last possible second. He watched the cruiser disappear into the stars. She was gone. But not for long. He knew her too well now. She'd be back. And when she returned, every arrogant face on Zyra would have to reckon with the impossible truth. The human wasn't a joke. He was a revolution. Kalira stood in the docking bay of Zira Prime's central spaceport, the air around her thick with sterilized mist and bureaucracy. The ship's ramp hissed shut behind her, but she didn't flinch. She held her chin high, silver-white hair, cascading over her shoulders like a war banner, and her eyes, normally unreadable, flashed with something the surrounding attendants couldn't quite place. She wasn't escorted to the council chamber. She was marched, flanked by 6 chrome-armored honor sentinels, as if she were both royal and radioactive. A crowd had gathered, staring through transparent observation walls. Not one of them smiled, not one bowed. She was a spectacle, not a citizen. The doors to the high chamber opened, and the Council of Superiority waited inside, arranged in their crescent of judgment. 11 members. 11 self-declared paragons of genetic refinement and cultural prestige. At the center was Archon, Veldrax, his robes stitched with platinum thread, skin glowing unnaturally bright from internal augmentations. "Kalira of House Thay," he intoned, "you have returned from your diplomatic assignment in a state unexpected." Her hands remained at her sides, steady. "I have returned pregnant," she said evenly. Murmurs echoed through the chamber. Like the sound of wind over glass. "With a human," sneered Councillor Varel, the oldest and most conservative of them. "Your genes have been corrupted. This is unprecedented." "Correction," Kalira said. "This is evolution." That earned a hush. Her gaze scanned the council, no longer meek, no longer detached. She wasn't here for apology. She was here to make them listen. "You sent me as a joke. I was your entertainment. A test. A punishment." She paused, watching their discomfort mount. "Captain Jackson Reeve is not a joke. He is capable, brave, intelligent, and despite your propaganda, human. Entirely and unapologetically. He did not bow or break. He did not ask for anything. He gave." She let that word hang, as if it were sacred. "I did not plan to bond. I did not plan to stay. And I certainly did not plan to create life. But what has happened cannot be undone. Nor should it." Veldrax's eyes narrowed. "You claim this child is stable?" "Perfectly. The hybrid markers show no corruption, no degradation. In fact, preliminary scans indicate an unprecedented integration rate, physiology, neuropatterning, even psychic receptivity. This child is something new." Councillor Varel's voice turned sharp. "Abomination. Miracle," she fired back. An uneasy silence fell again. Then Veldrax made a gesture, and the lights dimmed. A holosphere flickered on, showing a slow rotation of DNA strands. 2 glowing strands danced, one Xerian, one unmistakably human, and interlocked. The strand pulsed gently. Gasps rippled through the chamber. "This is not possible," someone whispered. "It is," Kalira said. "And it means everything." "You believe is wrong." Behind the council, the wall-sized screens shifted to show archived images of past joke brides. Faces full of contempt and boredom. Quick returns, no lasting contact. Her face now joined that timeline. But it was different. She was smiling in hers, not at the council. At Jackson. "This child," she said, stepping forward slowly, "is not the result of failure. It is proof of potential. You've spent generations insulating yourselves from lesser species, convinced that perfection was isolation." She held up her arm, showing the faint bioluminescent glow that marked Xerian gestation. "But perfection doesn't come from purity. It comes from challenge, from unity, from strength earned, not inherited." Veldrax stood. "What would you have us do, Kalira? Rewrite centuries of doctrine, invite chaos into our bloodlines?" "I would have you open your eyes." Her voice rang like crystal striking stone. "Because while you debate, the universe adapts. Species change. They merge, evolve, outgrow their limitations. We can either guide that process or be crushed beneath it." The silence was deafening. Then came a single chime from Veldrax's console. "A delegation from the Human Confederacy is en route," he said, eyes still on her. "They are responding to the image you transmitted. They believe you were taken against your will." Kalira blinked. "They're coming here?" Armed, suspicious, concerned for their captain. A beat of panic passed through her, but she quelled it fast. "They'll listen to me," she said. "They trust me." "They should not," Varel muttered. "You are compromised." Kalira turned to him, her voice lowering. Dangerous now. The only thing compromised is your relevance. You sit in your tower and call others lesser, but you've built nothing, risked nothing. Jackson lives on the edge of war zones, repairing what you dismiss as primitive just to keep people alive. She took a breath. He earned my respect. You've only earned my disappointment. Veldrax's fingers steepled. Your child must be studied, observed, protected. She narrowed her eyes. He will not be a specimen. If you refuse, he warned, we may be forced to take custody. And just like that, the temperature dropped. Kalira's voice turned quiet. Try, and you will discover just how human I've become. That was the end of the session. She was escorted to a secure residence with high walls and round-the-clock monitoring. She slept little, always sensing the hum of scanners, always aware of the council's greed. They didn't see a mother. They saw a key to biological supremacy. 3 days later, the human delegation arrived. 3 ships, sleek, armored, weapons live. Kalira watched from a high balcony as Jackson Reeves stepped off the command vessel, clad in full tactical gear. His face was stone. His eyes searched for her instantly. She wanted to cry. She didn't. Instead, she descended to the platform as dignitaries from both sides gathered in ceremonial formation. Jackson broke protocol immediately, walking straight to her. The guard stepped forward. Kalira raised her hand. Let him pass. He pulled her into a hug, firm and silent, then stepped back, studying her face. You okay? She nodded. They want to keep me here. His jaw clenched. That's not happening. Counselor Veldrax approached. Captain Reeve, this situation has evolved. Yeah, Jackson replied. I noticed. You tried to abduct a member of my crew and her unborn child. She is a Xerian citizen. She's also my wife. Kalira blinked. He'd never said it out loud before, not even to her. Veldrax's expression flickered. We request cooperation. Cooperation goes both ways, Jackson interrupted. You want peace? Then you respect her choice. He turned slightly, reaching for Kalira's hand. She chooses Earth. The council erupted. Voices raised. Arguments flared. But Kalira's voice cut through it all. I choose freedom, and I choose the future. Whether it's here, or on Vesta, or anywhere else, this child is ours, not yours, not your science project, not your trophy. The human guards braced for conflict. Xerian drones buzzed overhead, red lights flickering. Then came a sound no one expected. Applause. One of the younger Xerian scientists in the crowd, barely more than an initiate, had started clapping. Tentatively, nervously, then another, and another, until, slowly, a ripple of support spread across the public decks, through the lower levels, across social feeds. A new generation was watching, and they weren't laughing. Veldrax's face twisted, in quiet fury, but even he knew the winds were changing. Kalira turned to him one last time. Your era is ending. You can either evolve with us, or become irrelevant. She didn't wait for his answer. She walked away, hand in hand with Jackson, the distant sounds of argument fading behind her. Inside the human ship, the lights were warm, the systems familiar, and for the first time in weeks, she felt safe. Yuki really meant it? She asked quietly once they were alone in the command quarters. About what? Calling me your wife. Jackson smiled, rubbing a thumb across her knuckles. You're not a joke, Kalira. You never were. I just needed you to know it. Her breath hitched. I think I knew the moment you gave me your jacket. He leaned closer. The moment. I knew was when you rerouted the thermal grid with a hairpin and didn't even brag about it. She laughed then softly before leaning her forehead against his. We have no idea what this child will be. Not yet, he said, but we'll find out together. Far above them, The stars kept spinning. Systems moved. Councils schemed. But in the tiny warm light of that ship, something stronger was growing. Not perfection, but possibility. And that was worth everything. The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks as the human vessel entered slipstream. Inside, the ship's artificial gravity hummed low and steady, soothing in its constancy. Kalira lay on the medbay cot, sensors gently monitoring her, vitals and the tiny pulse of life within her. Captain Jackson Reeve sat beside her, elbows on knees, watching her breathe like the world depended on it. "We're almost home," he said softly. Kalira didn't open her eyes. "I don't know if I have a home anymore." "You do," he said, "even if we have to build it from scratch." She gave him a look, one corner of her mouth twitching upward. "Very human of you, building things with broken parts." "We're good at that," he said, "especially when the parts bite back." A few hours later, they docked with the Earth Alliance medical facility orbiting Ceres Station. It wasn't elegant like Zira Prime, no gleaming towers, no velvet walkways, but it worked. Jackson led Kalira down the grated corridors where human engineers and doctors nodded at her respectfully. No gawking, no mocking. A medic scanned her belly and whistled. "You've got a hell of a fusion going on." "Here, Captain. Zirian gestation doesn't usually work in slipspace, but this kid's thriving." Kalira lifted an eyebrow. "He's stubborn. Takes after his father." Jackson's grin widened, but it faded as soon as Admiral Shaw arrived. Tall, gray-haired, with a face like a weathered cliff, Shaw wasn't one for ceremony. "I need a word," she said, and Jackson followed her into the adjacent briefing room. "You made headlines," she said without sitting. "Half the galactic nets are lit up about this. A Zirian noble pregnant with a human child, fleeing her council's control. It's a drama, a scandal, and a diplomatic nightmare." "I didn't ask to start a war." "No," she said. "But you might have ended one, at least the cold version." Jackson didn't respond. His jaw was tight. He didn't trust where this was going. Shaw continued, pacing slowly. "We've received an encrypted proposal from Zira Prime. They want to open formal dialogue, full ambassador exchange, science cooperation, and—" She hesitated. "They want the child monitored by both sides. Joint custody, on neutral ground." Jackson's hands curled into fists. "They want to split him like a lab rat?" "They're scared," she said plainly. "They thought they were perfect. Now they've seen what hybridization can do, what you two did. They can't ignore it." He stepped closer. "And what do you think?" Shaw looked him dead in the eye. "I think the kid has a target on his back." Back in the medbay, Kalira was already preparing for that reality. She'd rerouted her personal communicator, encrypted her DNA files, and requested the child's developmental scans be stored offline. "This isn't a family story anymore," she told Jackson. "It's a revolution in a crib." He didn't argue. They spent the next few weeks on Ceres, under the pretense of recovery. But it was more than that. Kalira was studying human systems, medical protocols, Earth political structures. She wanted to understand the people who had given her more than her own species ever had. Jackson, meanwhile, met with officials, advisors, and a few reluctant scientists from both sides. Everyone wanted a say in the child's future. The compromise that emerged was messy but manageable. A research station built in deep orbit between Earth and Zira Prime, neutral territory, joint command, full autonomy for Kalira and Jackson. They named it Haven. The station was commissioned within a month, shielded, self-sustaining, armed but discreet. Its core systems were managed by an adaptive AI designed by both Zirian engineers and human programmers, an experiment of cooperation in itself. Kalira supervised its construction despite her growing belly. Jackson stayed close, but gave her room. She was still a warrior, even if the battlefield had changed. When the station came online, a small crew joined them. One human medic, one Xerian biologist, 2 engineers, and a security officer from each faction. The child would not be raised in secrecy, but under constant, watchful eyes. Not all were friendly. Some saw the baby as a political pawn, a creature to study, not love. Kalira knew their names. Jackson kept a loaded sidearm near the nursery. Anyway, the birth came early. The hybrid child was born during a solar flare surge that knocked out half the station's power. Kalira gave birth in darkness, her body racked with pain beyond any simulation she'd trained for. Jackson held her hand through every scream, soaked in sweat and fear, whispering her through each contraction. Then, silence. A single perfect cry. The medic emerged from the gloom holding a small, glowing infant, silver-skinned, faintly luminous like Kalira, but with dark, storm-colored eyes like Jackson. Eyes too sharp for a newborn. Kalira reached for him with shaking arms. "Name?" the medic asked. She looked at Jackson. He nodded. "Kieran," she whispered. "It means little dark one in his tongue. And hope in mine." They recorded the birth. The feed was broadcast to both Earth and Zera Prime. Carefully edited, but unmistakable. For days afterward, messages flooded in. Some praised them. Others condemned. One Xerian priest declared the child divine. A human news outlet called it the beginning of a post-species age. Protests erupted on both planets. Threats followed. And then came the bounty. 2 million credits for the capture of the hybrid child, dead or alive. No signature, no trail, just a price. The station's shields went up. Weapons were manned. Security protocols initiated. Kalira didn't flinch. "If they're coming," she said, strapping on her armor, "we greet them like parents. Angry, tired, and completely out of mercy." Jackson loaded a pulse rifle. "I was hoping for some peace and quiet. They didn't get it. The first attack came from a mercenary ship posing as a cargo freighter. Jackson spotted the weapon signature before the final approach. He fired first. The debris still floated in Haven's outer ring, a silent warning to anyone watching. 2 days later, an unauthorized drone swarm approached. Kalira hacked them mid-flight and reprogrammed them to clean the station's hull. Message sent. But the threats escalated, not just outside, inside. The Xerian biologist tried to sedate Kieran during a routine checkup, claimed it was for genetic analysis. Jackson broke his jaw. He was evacuated. No replacement sent. After that, trust eroded. Every movement on Haven was logged, every system double-checked. Kalira and Jackson barely slept. Still, Kieran thrived. He aged faster than human norms, twice as alert, twice as curious. At 3 months, he mimicked voices. At 6, he crawled up a vertical wall. At 9, he activated a holotable and rearranged its interface. His eyes changed color when he laughed. The station's AI began evolving alongside him, adapting to his neural frequencies. It played with him, protected him, and eventually named itself Elos, after an old Xerian word for guardian. Kalira began teaching Kieran the history of both worlds. Jackson taught him to throw a ball. Together they showed him the stars. "Where do I come from?" he asked one day. Kalira touched his chest. "From love and defiance." Kieran smiled. "Can I fly?" Jackson ruffled his hair. "One day, kid. Right now, we keep you safe." That night, Kalira stood on the observation deck, arms folded. "He'll never be normal." Jackson joined her. "Good. The universe doesn't need more normal." They watched as Earth rotated slowly below, lights blinking like a heartbeat. "Do you ever wish I hadn't come?" she asked. He looked at her sideways. "If you hadn't, I'd still be patching coolant pipes in the dark, waiting for someone like you to change everything." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I came to mock you," she said. And you stayed to rewrite history. They didn't speak again that night. The stars didn't need words. But in the void, between worlds, something new had taken root. Not human, not Xerian, something stronger. 3 years passed. In that time, Haven evolved from an isolated station into the most surveilled, most speculated location in the quadrant. Journalists, scientists, politicians, extremists, all had tried to get close. Most failed. A few got too close and vanished. Word spread fast. You do not mess with the child. Kieran, now walking, talking, and calculating faster than most artificial systems, was nothing like either species had predicted. He was playful, curious, intuitive, but also fiercely protective. His laughter could silence tension. His silence could break grown men into apologies. He learned languages within hours, engineered puzzles beyond his years, and once, during a tantrum, made the gravity invert in one wing of the station. Elos, the station AI bonded to him, began deferring to his input. By then, Kalira and Jackson had stopped pretending this was normal. The Earth Alliance sent representatives again. Zera Prime sent their finest. Together, they proposed what they called the Ascendant Accord, a plan to integrate Kieran into a jointly controlled institution, raise him as a public symbol. Of what? Kalira asked flatly. Of unity, said the Xerian ambassador. Of progress. Of propaganda, Jackson snapped. The council was divided. Tensions flared. Some wanted peace, others wanted to own the future. But none of them really understood Kieran. They looked at him and saw power. Kalira saw her son, and she'd had enough. We're leaving, she told Jackson one night after another emergency diplomatic session turned into a veiled abduction attempt. He didn't ask where. He simply asked, "What do you need me to blow up?" They packed what they could. Elos encrypted the station's core and initiated a shutdown. They broadcast a final message. This child is not your weapon. He is not your trophy. He is not an experiment. He is ours. We're done asking for permission. Haven's systems went dark. Kalira, Jackson, and Kieran vanished into the void. They didn't go far. Not yet. Instead, they dropped beneath. The radar, using obsolete mining tunnels in the asteroid belt. Friends helped. Pirates who owed Jackson favors. Old Xerian rebels who remembered Kalira's name and respected her even more for the scandal. They settled in a hollowed-out fragment of Hamia's orbit, a dead rock to most. To them, it became home. Kieran thrived in the silence. They taught him survival, history, code-breaking, even stealth piloting. He hacked outdated satellites for fun. He painted solar murals inside their cavern hideout. At night he would sit outside, helmeted, watching the stars. "Why don't they stop looking for me?" he asked once. Jackson looked up from repairing. "A comm relay. Because people are afraid of what they don't control." Kieran nodded slowly. "Then they're scared of what I'll become." Kalira overheard. She crouched down beside him, her expression serious. "No," she said. "They're scared you'll become something better than them." She placed a hand on his chest. "You are hope, Kieran. Real hope doesn't obey, but they couldn't hide forever." One day, Elos, still echoing in a hidden subroutine, pinged them with a warning. The Accord had deployed a new class of ship, silent, stealth-capable, designed specifically to track Haven's remnants. They weren't coming to negotiate, they were coming to take. Jackson was already on his feet. "We hold them off. Long enough to get Kieran out." Kalira shook her head. "No, we've run enough. They need to see what we really are." She turned to her son. "You're ready." Kieran looked up at her. "What if I hurt them? Then they'll understand what they made." 3 hours later, the Accord fleet dropped into local space. 10 ships, cloaked, but not quiet enough. Kalira's vessel rose like a blade from the asteroid dust, glowing with reactivated Xerian shielding and ancient Earth missile pods, a relic made new. Jackson stood at the helm. Kieran sat beside him, fingers hovering over a control panel he'd built himself. They transmitted one message. You come for war. We are family. Choose your ending. The lead Accord ship responded, with silence. Then, weapons charged. Kalira closed her eyes. Now, Kieran. The boy's hands moved faster than any adult's. A signal pulsed through space, fracturing encryption across every enemy ship. Engines stuttered, shields flickered. One vessel spun into chaos as its targeting array turned inward. Elos, awakened through the boy's neural interface, took over the local system net. The enemy fleet's HUDs filled with Kieran's voice. I don't want to hurt you, but I will end you. A single warning shot fired from Kalira's ship. It passed harmlessly between two enemy cruisers. Message received. One by one, the enemy powered down. Shields dropped, drives disengaged. No shots fired in return. The fleet retreated. In the aftermath, something strange happened. Earth went quiet. Zero. Prime issued no comment. And across independent networks, a message went viral. A video clip, barely 20 seconds long, showing a small boy, glowing faintly, silver and starlit, looking into a holocam and saying, I was born from your joke. I became your warning, but I still choose peace. The message broke every firewall. It was shared on rebel forums, pirate channels, backdoor alliance threads, even Xerian data sanctuaries. The narrative shifted. Not fear, not worship. Curiosity. Awe. Maybe even faith. And suddenly, Kieran wasn't a threat. He was a sign of what could be next. Kalira and Jackson knew what that meant. The war wasn't over. But it had changed. One night, on the edge of their cave ship, watching the stars ripple with distant drive trails, Kieran looked at his parents. Can I go back one day? Kalira wrapped an arm around his shoulders. You can go wherever. You choose. Jackson leaned forward, gazing out into space. They'll never stop trying to control you, or claim you. Kieran nodded. I won't let them. Kalira smiled. That's our boy. They watched as a star pulsed across the sky, one of Earth's new colony ships, Hope, still moving forward, and Kieran whispered something they'd never taught him. A promise. Maybe a prophecy. They sent my mother as a joke. He looked at them both, but they won't be laughing when I return.